Major Nziogwu, can you please give me an account of the night of the coup in Kaduna?
Well, it's rather something like the longest day. We started this off on the night of the 13th of January when a night exercise was planned by the military college, which I command. We took our troops to the ground and taught them how to do night attacks.
The very first military coup in Nigeria was planned and executed by a group of young military officers led by Major Chukwuma Kaduna Nzeogwu. The plan had been in place for a while, but it was executed on January 15, 1966. The coup was bloody, leaving in its trail a number of assassinations. Assassinations that is seen by many as the genesis of the deep-rooted distrust between some ethnic groups in Nigeria till today. Welcome to this edition of Back in History. At the time of the coup, Nigeria was divided into 4 regions: the northern region, the eastern region, the western region, and the midwestern region. Each region had a premier who was the chief executive officer and administrator of the region, the equivalent of governors in today's Nigeria. While Ladoke Akintola was the premier of the western region, Sir Ahmadu Bello was the premier of the northern region. While Dr. Michael Okpara was the premier of the eastern region, Dennis Osadebe was the premier of the midwestern region. The coup plotters positioned themselves strategically to attack and kill the premiers at their residencies. They also positioned themselves to attack and kill other leading political figures in the country. Thus, in a well-calculated plan, Sir Ladoke Akintola, the then premier of the western region, was assassinated in Ibadan, the capital of the region, on 15 January 1966. Sir Ahmadu Bello, the premier of the northern region, was also assassinated on 15 January 1966. It is said that at the time of his assassination, Sir Ahmadu Bello had 3 wives. One of the wives, Hafsatu, was also killed in the coup. Only Dr. Michael Okpara and Dennis Osadebe were not killed among the 4 premiers. Aside the 2 premiers, a couple of leading politicians and senior military officers were also killed in the coup. Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, the first and only Prime Minister of Nigeria, was killed in that coup. It is believed that he was killed in Lagos, though his body was discovered on the roadside near Lagos 6 days after he was killed. Abubakar Tafawa Balewa was later buried in Bauchi, in his hometown, the present-day Bauchi state. He was a close associate, friend, and political ally to Sir Ahmadu Bello, who was also killed in the same coup. The 5 Naira note, which is a legal tender in Nigeria today, bears the portrait of Abubakar Tafawa Balewa. Festus Okotie-Eboh, who was Nigeria's Minister of Finance at the time, was also killed. He was killed in Lagos. Brigadier Samuel Ademologun was also killed. It is stated that this military officer was killed in his bedroom when a bullet was fired to his head. His wife Latifa Ademologun was also killed. The other person that was killed in the coup was Brigadier Zakaria Mai Malari. The other person that was killed was Lieutenant Colonel Abogo Lagema, who was killed in a hotel in Ikoyi. Lieutenant Colonel James Palm, the Adjutant General at the Army headquarters at the time, was also killed in the coup. Lieutenant Colonel Otho Unegwe was also killed. Lieutenant Colonel Kuru Mohammed was also killed. Ahmed Musa, Sir Ahmadu Bello's Senior Assistant Secretary for Security, was also killed. Ahmed Pategi, Sir Ahmadu Bello's driver, was also killed. one Zarumi Sardauna was also killed. Others killed in the coup were Colonel Ralph Shodende, PC Yohana Gakawa, PC Hagai Lai, PC Akman Anduka, Lance Corporal Musa Nimzo, and Philip Lewande. One Sergeant Daramola Oyegoke was also killed. This sergeant is said to have assisted Nzogu in the attack on the Sardauna's lodge. And according to the reports submitted by the police about the coup, this sergeant was killed by Nzogu himself. It is not clear till date what would have made Nzogu to assassinate the same man who assisted him in the attack that successfully eliminated his target. In all, no fewer than 22 persons were killed in the coup. This was by far the bloodiest coup in post-independent Nigeria. It appears that since this coup, Nigeria has never been the same till today. At the time of the coup, Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, the then president of Nigeria, was on a cruise to the Caribbean for vacation, and the Senate President Nwafo Orizo was the acting president. Nwafo Orizo immediately briefed President Nnamdi Azikiwe on phone about the events that occurred in the country. Nwafo Orizo was ordinarily expected to take over the reins of power, but it appears that the assassinations that was carried out by the coup plotters had scared life out of Nwafo Orizo, who then invited the most senior military officer in the country, Major General Johnson Aguiyi Ironsi, to take over the reins of power.
From the information at my disposal, the cabinet decided to transfer power to him as the general officer commanding the armed forces. It means an abdication of power, and it means then the suspension of the president, the prime minister, the 4 regional governors, and the 4 regional premiers. In other words, the civilian authorities have found it impossible to maintain law and order, and have transferred same to the military authorities until law and order can be maintained.
Ironsi accepted the invitation and became Nigeria's first military head of state. He immediately established the Supreme Military Council in Lagos and commenced the administration of the country. His tenure was, however, cut short by a group of northern military officers who staged a counter-coup in July 1966. Barely 6 months into Ironsi's rule, Ironsi went on a tour to the then western region of Nigeria. And after his scheduled meeting with traditional rulers and leaders of thought, he decided to sleep over in the government house in Ibadan with Colonel Adekunle Fajuyi as his host. Fajuyi was the military governor of the region. In the early hours of the following day, Ironsi was arrested by then Major T.Y. Danjuma and taken away together with Fajuyi to a destination that was not immediately disclosed. Their bodies were later found in a shallow grave in a bush in Ibadan, and the bodies were riddled with bullets. It is reported that T.Y. Danjuma, the man who arrested Ironsi in Ibadan, was in the convoy of Ironsi from Lagos as part of Ironsi's security detail. In the aftermath, Yakubu Gowon was appointed by the coup leaders to take over the reins of power as the military head of state. Yakubu was later removed from office by Murtala Muhammad. Murtala Muhammad would later be assassinated barely 200 days after taking over from Gowon. He was then succeeded by Olusegun Obasanjo, who was his deputy head of state. Some questions naturally come to mind about this coup. Number 1. Was there a national radio broadcast by the coup plotters, as it is always the case when there is a military takeover? The answer to this is that Major Chukwuma Kaduna Nzeugwu, the leader of the coup, had expected that his colleague in the coup, Emmanuel Ifeajuna, who was assigned to execute the plan in Lagos, was going to make a national broadcast on their takeover of the reins of power following the successful assassination of key political figures in the country. To Nzeugwu's surprise, it appears that Ifeajuna was unable to make his way to Radio Nigeria and make the national broadcast, as efforts had already been made by key officers in the army, especially in Lagos, to frustrate the coup. When Nzeugwu learns that Ifeajuna did not make the broadcast as was planned, and that the most senior military officer at the time, Aguiyi Ironsi, had not been killed, Nzeugwu hurriedly drafted a speech, which was broadcast on Radio Kaduna, not Radio Nigeria. The broadcast was at about 12 midnight. In the said broadcast, Nzeugwu declared martial law over the northern provinces of Nigeria. This action never saw the light of the day, as the events that followed from the seat of power in Lagos immediately made the coup attempt an unsuccessful endeavor, as Aguiyi Ironsi was made to take over the reins of power. The other question is, what were the reasons given for the coup? The answer to this is, according to the coup planners, unquote, the coup was plotted because the men at the helm of affairs were running Nigeria aground with their corrupt ways, and the ministers under them were living in affluence by looting public funds at the expense of the masses, unquote. Thus, they need, according to the coup plotters, to eliminate them and begin a new country. This rationale has been widely criticized and faulted by many up till today, as corruption is still a recurring decimal in Nigeria. The other question is, were the coup plotters tried by any military tribunal? The answer to this is that they were not tried. Ironsi's regime failed to set up a military tribunal to try the coup plotters, despite calls from several quarters for them to be tried, as it has always been the case when a coup fails. Some of the coup plotters were only arrested and detained, and eventually released back to the army. It is said that while in jail, their salaries were paid in full without any deduction whatsoever. The failure to set up a military tribunal to try these coup plotters would be a major reason for the overthrow of General Aguiyi Ironsi. The other question is, what can we say are the effects of this coup on Nigeria? Here is the answer. The January 15 coup is said to be a major cause of the deep-seated distrust that exists between some ethnic groups in Nigeria till today. It was largely seen by the Northerners as a coup against the North by young officers of Igbo extraction. Efforts have been made by many to debunk this assertion over time. For instance, it has been held in some quarters that the coup was frustrated by the efforts of some senior military officers of Igbo extraction, such as Odumegwu Ojukwu, who wielded great influence in the North at the time. Despite these explanations, however, the scars, the distrust, the assumptions, and the conclusions about the January 1966 coup are still present in Nigeria among the ethnic groups and in the political arena till today. The other question is, what are the names of the coup plotters? And here is the answer. Number 1, Major Chukwuma Kaduna Nzeugwu, who was the leader of the coup, even though some persons have argued that the leader of the coup was Emmanuel Ifeajuna. The second person was Major Timothy Onwatuegu. The third person was Major Emmanuel Ifajuna. The fourth person was Major Humphrey Chukwuka. The fifth person was Major Adewale Ademoyega. Number 6 was Major Donatus Okafor. Donatus was the commander of the Federal Guards Brigade, and he was saddled with the responsibility of providing security to Nigeria's Prime Minister Abubakar Tafawa Balewa. Donatus was fluent in Hausa and Igbo and had a personal relationship with the Prime Minister. He was in fact considered as a member of the Prime Minister's household and could go in and out of the household at any time without query or suspicion. It is said that Donatus was critical about the coup and quite reluctant to give his master away. This was because of the close relationship that he had with his master. It is however not clear at what time, at what point Donatus decided to give him away.